I'm very happy to welcome you to this webinar from the SEEP Network on AFRECS, the American Friends of the Episcopal Church of the Sudans. We are very grateful to the SEEP Network for bringing together this program, and I would like to first introduce the participants. My name is Dane Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of AFRECS. First, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Balal. Dr. Balal earned his bachelor's and doctorate in the UK, and then returned to South Sudan in 2014 to manage the project to create the Episcopal University of South Sudan. What an assignment. In addition to the university, of which he's now acting vice chancellor, he has become an indispensable person for the primate, the Archbishop Justin Badi Arama, working with the church's Justice, Peace, and Reconciliation Commission, heading the primate's COVID-19 task force, and undertaking many other tasks at the same time. Secondly, Phil Darrow. Phil Darrow has been on the AFRECS board since 2008. He's a lawyer for KB Home, which is a home building company based in California. While living in Barrington, Illinois, Phil became part of the RINC Ministry Partnership at St. Michael's Episcopal, where he worked to create partnerships between the RINC Diocese, USAID, and the International Organization for Migration. And he has been president of AFRECS since 2016. Jackie Kraus, coming to us from Chicago today, is a co-founder of AFRECS. She began visits to RINC from the Diocese of Virginia in 1998, way back before the end of the Civil War. She was one of the first Americans to go to South Sudan. She was co-founder and convener of the Chicago Association for the Lost Boys of Sudan in 2001. And as a AFRECS board member, she edited for 10 years our Sudan Connections newsletter. More recently, she became a member of the Episcopal Task Force on Dialogue with the South Sudanese Anglican Diaspora. She's a member of St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Barrington, Illinois, and also St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. And she continues very active support for the RINC Diocese. So I think we can now put up the slides. Move on to the next slide. I'm showing a picture of Sudan before 2011, when Sudan and South Sudan were part of the same nation, but locked in civil war. We're going to be talking initially mostly about South Sudan, so we can move to the next slide. So our first question with that map in the background is, what is AFRECS? What was its origin and the original connection with the Episcopal Church of Sudan and then the Episcopal Church of South Sudan? And I'd like to ask Jackie Kraus to respond first to that question.
Thank you, Dane. And I just want to send greetings to all the people who have joined us on this webinar with a lot of thanks. Way back in 1998, that trip, Dane, I will just make one correction. We were the first team to go into RINC. Other people, I think, had been to other places in South Sudan. But RINC, being so close to the border of Khartoum, made it a kind of a no-go limit area. and we were able to get there by a miracle, I'm sure.
I might mention that rank is at the very top of your map of South Sudan.
Right. Thank you. As time went on, with the involvement that started actually in 1997, a first meeting with Bishop Daniel Dangbul, the first bishop of rank, now retired Archbishop and Primate of the Episcopal Church of Sudan. After meeting him and talking and finding out that a lot of other people, maybe not a lot, but other people were becoming involved in different areas of South Sudan. And we would kind of accidentally bump into each other through some kind of communication or a conference. And it seemed to me that we needed to know each other, and we needed to network together. We needed to support each other prayerfully and so forth. And so I began to envision a conference way back in '98, I think, that would address these needs for us to know each other. And it was going to be called We Will Not Forget You. And I see that Jeffrey Hoare is on the call today. It was in his diocese or in his church at All Saints that vision came to me. That kind of conference did not take place. That dream was not fulfilled. However, it was, I guess, to be put on hold in waiting for more people to arise and more experience with the church in the Sudan before we jumped in. So AFRECS was an outcome of, I think, it was meant to network among us. Did that address your question?
Yes, let's move to the next slide, please. So actually, it was created in 2005, Jackie, by you and by
a team of people.
Richard
Jones
and Fritz Gilbert and others.
Right, many others. We hosted we didn't host, St. Paul's Church in Virginia, Alexandria hosted the first conference, and the conference began, it was not called AFRECS, but by the time the conference ended, it was a 2-day conference, a collection of great people, missionaries. The Lost Boys and Girls had begun to come in 2001, so they were present. Missionaries, other volunteers, a lot of interested people in the future of the church in Sudan gathered there. And by the end of the conference, which had a lot of workshops, I don't know, Dane, were you at that one?
I don't think so.
Okay, because there were a lot of professionals there too who could help us with insights about Sudan. And by the end of the conference, the American Friends of the Episcopal Church was inaugurated, and a board was developed to carry it forward. It was not meant to be a fundraising organization, but a membership organization that was supported by dues paid by churches, dioceses, individuals, organizations, so that we could bring Sudanese guests to future conferences and planned conferences. That was the origin.
So why don't we move to the next slide? I might note that the creation of AFRECS followed the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement, which envisaged a referendum on the future of South Sudan. So that was very timely.
Yes.
Phil, would you like to continue?
Sure. I would say I'm going to speak a little bit more about how we've evolved, but these last two slides, I think, are just sort of meant to illustrate the continuing strength of some of these diocesan relationships. This one illustrates the Bishop of Chicago in rank, blessing a new church, and as the title slide pointed out, being present. And so we're still engaged in supporting, promoting those relationships and seeking to create new ones. This particular partnership, covenant relationship, is years and years old and extremely strong. But we have also evolved into a couple of particular projects, undertaking that I think are spun off of the priorities that we have kind of discerned from the province, from the Archbishop, and from others, including Dr. Balal. And by the way, before I get too much further into that, I certainly want to thank the SEEP Network for arranging this, not only for making me feel like I'm right next door to my friend, Reverend Dr. Balal, but for allowing me to put on a sport coat for almost the first time since March. So appreciate that. You know, obviously an important part of any kind of relationship across the miles and across the ponds is really trying to understand what others' priorities are, and that's what we've tried to do. And the two primary things, given the history of conflict in this nation and the struggles that most everyone has endured, are certainly peacemaking, reconciliation, and trauma healing, which I guess as academic subjects are distinct, but they all blend together since virtually everyone in the country has experienced some form of trauma. So that's clearly been a focus of ours as we've gotten involved in individual projects. And the other being education, and one could almost say that development of education resources is part and parcel with the other topic as well.
I might just add, Phil, that after independence, we did begin quietly providing financial support to certain projects, but I would say the outbreak of civil war in 2013 created a new focus in supporting the church, the role of the Episcopal Church of South Sudan in peacebuilding, which has become the center of its activities.
Right. So I think actually, if we might turn to the next slide.
Yeah, perhaps we could ask Dr. Joseph Balal to talk a little bit about priorities before we get into our particular projects. Why don't we ask you if I can step in here, Dr. Joseph, to comment on the priorities of the Episcopal Church of South Sudan and how the Episcopal Church of South Sudan views AFRECS.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dane. It is a great pleasure to be here today in the webinar that we hold together today. And let me sincerely thank all members of AFRECS and all the supporters of AFRECS. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for the great support that you have given to South Sudan. And also I would like to bring greetings from His Grace, Archbishop and Primate Justin Badi, who is so grateful to hear that we are holding these conversations today. The priorities that the Episcopal Church have, as mentioned before with my brother Philip, is that we always tend to think much now about peace, which is very important. And particularly in peace, we had about 3 things that we were thinking much about it. That is currently, I'm just talking now of the current situation that we are in. We want so much the issue to do with the implementation of the peace agreement that is there. We also wanted to see that we have the issue to do with the nation building, which will bring in the issue of reconciliations and advocacy and so on. We want also to see about the issues to do with security arrangements and so on. But that is one of the biggest priorities that we have. But I think also the greatest one, more than even what we are talking about, well, war is there, peace definitely will come, and war will come to an end. What is it that is a long term? I think the long term is the issue of the education. Because I think most of you have heard me all the time speaking that in South Sudan, what is it that creates South Sudan to become so violent? I think we are suffering from what I always call the poverty of mind, which is more dangerous than material poverty. Because if you are not oriented and enlightened and educated properly, it just things are always murky, and it's not right. And with all the trauma, it's more easier that something that is very small can just trigger violence. And that is why at the heart of the Episcopal Church, the theological educations is very essential, that we need to train people who are God-fearing, the people that can be able to disseminate the message of the kingdom, the holistic programs. But not only that, we are also thinking now of bringing the other, other subject in, like law, agriculture, medicines, educations, because we need teachers that will be able, we need nurses, we need doctors in the country, we need engineers, and all these are the people that can be able to build a Southern Sudan that will be so peaceful. So, and that's why when I went for my studies in the UK, it is not that easier for me just sitting there. I had a debt really to come back and pay for this debt in the South Sudan, coming to create the university in order that we can be able to have South Sudanese, young South Sudanese at least, to get into high education. It's not enough only just giving them primary educations and then secondary education. So what? They may have all this knowledge, but if you want them really to have the skills, expertise, and experienced people that would be engineers and so on, they need to have that kind of high quality and high, qualifications in order for them to be able to build a country. And I would like to say that we are very, very grateful for the support that AFRECS has already given to the theological educations, like in Rain, like in Bishop Gwynn College. Now you're even supporting the university and so on. We can mention so many things. There are so many things that we are so grateful and thankful for them, which AFRECS has done. So in one way, if I have to describe what AFRECS is, maybe I will put it in this analogy. It's just like an anchor, of a ship that is a wrecked ship that is just tottering because of waves and almost is steering apart. But that anchor was able to hold that, boat together so that it did not fall into pieces and sink. So in another word, AFRECS has given us a lifeline in many ways for us to be able to engage our people in the issues to do with advocacy for peace, peace building, and then also even engaging our politicians, encouraging them to, to be peaceful, to dialogue, and bringing the communities together that are shattered because of all the trauma and the fighting that is going on. And AFRECS has been there, not only just giving us money, but you're coming physically to see us. It describes something distinctive, which is so great. And that something that is distinctive is actually the love and the care that is coming from Christ Jesus, who died for all of us. What is it that make Americans to think of South Sudanese who are so strangers, far away, on the other side of the phone, and then you just walk from there coming and to be with us? Is simply because of that love of Christ and giving me that center of mission, which is again taking me back to think about Christ in heaven, coming to our planet Earth, living among us, be our example, and even die for us in order that we will be alive. And here you are, our friends, coming to South Sudan, like Jackie, like Dames, like Bill, and the others that had come to us and identify with us, sympathize with us. Is so great. And we are very, very, very grateful for that.
Well, thank you very much for that. I want to add here that in my 2 recent visits to South Sudan, I was particularly impressed by the quality of leadership in the South Sudan Episcopal Church. Obviously, the primate, who has been for the last 2 years exercising enormous leadership, but the individual bishops who are very, many of them very entrepreneurial and pushing their own programs of peace building. This is a very impressive group of leaders, including the Women's Union in South Sudan. So we may be working as an anchor, and I like your image there, but we are working with a very powerful and influential group of people who are making a tremendous difference in peace building. At this point, I'd like to ask Phil in particular, and then Jackie, you can comment perhaps, to talk a little bit about individual projects. Phil, first for individual AFRECS projects, and I guess the question related to those projects is, why should Americans, particularly American Christians, American Episcopalians, and others support AFRECS program in South Sudan?
Well, thank you. And thank you, Reverend Doctor, for prompting my comments beautifully. Because I was going to say, I think those of us involved in this mission have never thought of South Sudan as a cause or support of the church as a cause. It's always been very personal and relational. And that's really the most powerful form of mission, I think, is when it's personal. And I think we all have our stories as to how we got involved. I sometimes say I fell backwards into it, but actually Jackie Kraus pushed me into it. And once I developed relationships, certainly there was no looking back. As Reverend Doctor alluded to, it's to me, you know, the gospel underpinning is that it's the broadest definition of neighbor. So when I think about our projects, I started to speak about how we hope they align with the priorities that have been laid out for us. But you know, they are also very personal. One of the phrases I learned early on in this work, I think coming from the former Archbishop, is come and see and you will know what to do. And the first project I will mention is a perfect example of that. AFRECS for a few years now has been the primary supporter of this school of orphans and unaccompanied minors within what's known as POC3, which is, for those of you who may have read about it, what started out as a makeshift place where a minority population within the capital, Juba, ran to for security. It was a UN security compound, or a UNMISS compound, not designed at all to be a displaced persons camp or to serve any other purpose than as a base for the UN mission there. But a population of different ethnic groups that felt extremely threatened at the outbreak of the Civil War, ran there for safety and have been there ever since. And that included a lot of orphans and unaccompanied minors. So a bishop of the Episcopal Church of South Sudan, who's not from the capital, he's from the north, where this group of primarily Nuer tribal members has their place of origin, all found themselves in the capital, and he set out to establish a school for these children. And AFRECS, having made a visit there and been face to face with these students, developed a relationship that has gone on for several years. I can tell a couple of stories since I've made a subsequent visit to the first one that occurred. And on the personal side of this, to see the kids' faces light up when these 3 old men came visiting from the US with a couple of duffels of used clothing to distribute, and our former executive director with his white beard for all the world looking like Santa Claus. Again, the connection that you establish face to face in those situations, and the power of relationship is really, I think, what this mission is about.
Maybe we could move to the next slide, please.
Sure. This sign is what greeted us, and with all its charm, says a lot about the relational aspect. We can't forget you forever, and that goes right back to Jackie's founding quote about "We will not forget you." And you know, there is an ocean of need in the world, and despite the Reverend Doctor's analogy of an anchor, I'm much more humble about our actual impact in terms of whatever the amount of funds raised or the investment in the school or any other project, but one can never discount the importance of people being remembered and being seen and heard. And so again, I go back to the aspect of just showing up of this mission, which is an important part of it. So, and I guess I would just comment too that when we discussed this ongoing project with the new Archbishop, he immediately saw its importance, not only to the theme of education that was his priority, but as an example of peace and reconciliation and healing, because of the particular vulnerable population served of, you know, a group of threatened ethnic minority orphan children. I don't know what group of people you could describe as more vulnerable than that, and the symbolic importance of standing with this group as a way of making a statement about healing and reconciliation shouldn't be lost.
Just a couple of details about that project. The number of students grew to 150. These are divided between boys and girls, but not only are there classrooms for these children and are they studying, but they've been tested, and they've tested very well by comparison with their peers in other schools in South Sudan. So these kids are getting a real education. And one of the things that's happened very interestingly over this past period of COVID is that the school was shut down for a while, but the bishop led in moving ahead with construction of additional classrooms and a fence to provide more security and protection during this period. And the school is now reopened.
Thanks. I think we can move to a next slide. So this is a recent photograph, fairly recent, that Dane took of another project that we are involved in the Diocese of Rank. And again, that reflects in part just the long-standing and close relationship, in particular with Bishop Joseph of Rank, that you know, not only Chicago, but other members of Virginia and other members of AFRECS have developed. And again, touching on the themes of the crossover between peace, reconciliation, trauma healing, and education, we've partnered with an organization known as 5 Talents, famous for its kind of microfinance and vocational training all around the globe, but in particular doing some great work in South Sudan. And again, going back to the theme of discerning what the community is looking for, Bishop Joseph's vision for this this project is sweeping but quite simple. If we want to develop our youth who have been through trauma to recover from this conflict and move forward in a positive way, we need to look for ways to combine vocational training with the peace and reconciliation themes, basically to develop a group of young leaders that will find a positive way forward and with something to do. In South Sudan, the militias are, as youth gangs are in the US, a place that young people who don't see a future or don't see a way forward turn to. And so, you know, there are a lot of similarities, frankly, that we face with some of our social issues that are faced in South Sudan. So 5 Talents has people on the ground working both with women's groups and youth groups in somewhat of a train the trainer kind of format to develop these little sort of economic circles and develop vocational skills along with you know, peace and reconciliation techniques and skills as well. And so it touches the priorities. And Dane, you made a personal visit. You may want to add some comments about that.
Sure, let's move to the next slide.
Yeah.
Here is the groups that are meeting in and around Rank. There are 15 of them, divided between women's groups and young men. In the women's groups, the initial focus is on providing literacy and numeracy, and then bringing them into savings activities using their own resources. It's a model which 5 Talents has used successfully elsewhere in Africa. And these groups, in spite of COVID, there are 15 groups and 14 of them are still operating as of this fall, which I think is remarkable. What we did with 5 Talents was to integrate with this program trauma healing training so that they receive guidance in that area. And trauma healing is a demand by South Sudanese that is almost universal. They have gone through so much, starting with the civil war with the North, and then their own civil war which broke out in 2013. They've all just gone through tremendous suffering, losing family members, problem of rape and violence against women. So trauma healing is something that they are very much interested in. And I was struck when I visited in February that one young woman said, "We need more trauma healing." And she said, "This is so useful to me and my family." So what we are trying to do now is to respond to a broader pattern of trauma healing. Also, I wanted to emphasize that the fact that these groups meet weekly means that not only can they do their literacy and their savings, but they can continue to discuss trauma healing and what they can do to heal themselves in their communities. So it works extremely well. So I wanted to go on to Jackie because we want to talk a bit more about the support which others are providing to South Sudan, other dioceses and parishes in South Sudan. So Jackie, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Thank you, Dane. And I've really been enjoying learning all the things AFRECS is moving toward at the moment, the outgrowth and development and the commitments of you and Phil. It's very moving to me sitting here and listening to it. So I would like to go back then, if I could, to a first awareness. I'm thinking often as I was preparing for this, first awareness and first steps. The first awareness that we had about the suffering, the tragedies of the Civil War, the first Civil War, 21 years long, was heart-wrenching and moved many of us who would hear about it from Bishop Daniel Dangbull, who attended seminary in Virginia for a year. One of the things that it occurred to me for those who are listening to this, watching this, is some information might be helpful. Some history might be helpful. For instance, I have 2 books here, But God is Not Defeated. I will hold it up so people can see it. But God is Not Defeated. The church was established in 1899. So there's a lot of history in the faith journey. And then Day of Commitment, Day of Devastation, Day of Contentment is another very good primer on the history of the church in Sudan and how these people have come to where they are. I think that's kind of important to attach that all together. If you're considering taking up the mission of South Sudan on its long road to peacebuilding and pastoral mission by being present, prayerfully, physically, and financially. And I'd also then move on to share with you the outcome of the beginnings of what happens when you do get involved. A lot of many things. We have a church here in Chicago called All Saints. It's in a neighborhood called Ravenswood. The former rector is now Bishop of Michigan. So that's a very lively and interested church. She led them into relationship with the diocese with a particular church, St. Peter's in Gager. They have put that in their budget, their annual budget, to support the clergy at St. Peter Gager. But then they went another step further through the youth in their church who do the research on where to distribute funds that they raise every year to go out into the world. And Rank Diocese is at the top of that list. They have what I think is phenomenal. They have a 1 hour long bake auction between services at the church. And all the baked goods are auctioned off. They raise $25,000 and more every year. They've been doing this for about 10 or more years. And the outcome of that has been amazing. They support a midwife at the Rank Clinic. They support Dr. Paul's salary. And one of the highlights that I have to share with you right now is one of their cakes raised $1,000 in bidding. It was a Ruth Bader Ginsburg cake. And I wish I had been there. I wish I had been there. But anyway, they have a ball doing it, and they do such good work. Another church in the diocese does a concert, beautiful concert every year. They have many professional musicians in their church, and they give their time and they do a beautiful concert and have an auction with that as well. At St. Michael's Church, my own parish and Phil's former parish, to which he's always welcome back, by the way. We have, for 5 years, we had a soiree, a dinner with Bishop Joseph attending, and usually another guest in relationship with Rank, a dinner and an auction, and always entertainment by the Lost Boys, many of whom, well, they're scattering now, but they came, we received about 350 in Chicago when they started coming in 2001. So the Lost Boys add another dimension of education for us. They have been instrumental in raising awareness about life in the Sudan. And I think another reason, or a reason that I was very involved in welcoming them, I did not settle them. They came through agencies that did the resettling, but I introduced them to a church near the neighborhood they lived in. Father John Ashley greeted them at his church, St. Paul's Church by the Lake, very warmly. And for years, we met there once a week for dinner, for programs, for fun. All the time, I was thinking of their mothers, many of whom did not know where their boys were. And then there were the stories about them discovering that their mother or their father or a brother is alive and returning to the country to, as young men, to meet some of their family members they hadn't seen for over 20 years. And this all started, this all goes back, and there are many other churches in Chicago that do things too. It started with the come and see and you will know what to do, which Bishop Daniel said to all of us at a conference in South Carolina back in 1997, 98, when he brought us videos of the torture, of the persecution, of the burned fields and the charred skeletons. We couldn't believe it. And he said to us, where are you? You brought Christianity to us. The Western world brought Christianity to us. And where are you? We are dying for our faith. And we responded by saying, well, what can we do? What can we do? And he said, first of all, pray. And he said, and then come and see, and you will know what to do. Well, in 98, he had 7 of us there arriving in Khartoum, 6 people from Diocese of Virginia and myself from Chicago. And we were the first Americans to go to rank. Rank was a border kind of between the North and the South. So it was kind of a safe area. It was a no-go zone, but somehow the bishop and his people got us there to spend several days. We saw tremendous devastation, heard stories of persecution and villages and churches that were devastated. And we also saw faith alive and growing. And so that exposure, which I don't think I can maybe speak for all 7 of us, we did not know what to expect. We were going to a war zone, but we felt safe because the people took good care of us. But Bishop Daniel was the first bishop of rank. He was planting churches, building schools, teaching, reaching out for partners in the US after he had studied at Virginia. He introduced the team to his vision of a Bible school. And Dr. Joseph, you have such a good role to play in the development of rank as a center for peace and reconciliation. Am I right about that? It is now the Center for Peace Studies. And there were 4 brick posts in the dusty desert that Bishop Daniel showed us and said, that is the beginning of my Bible school. Some members of our church, this is how God works through us, decided to give money. They had $15,000 to donate, wanted to know how the bishop could use it. So I phoned him from Barrington to rank, which was kind of amazing back then, to let him know he could start building his Bible school, which is now Rank Theological College and has graduated many, many students, women included. And those are the things that happen when you step out and you take that first step. And the first step just becomes more and more and more and multiplies, it just multiplies worldwide. So
Jackie, thank you for.
Yes, thank you for letting me.
We're going to have to move along a bit here.
Please.
I just wanted to say that in addition to rank, where there's been a great deal of support, including support for agriculture and a secondary school, the Diocese of Iowa has been working with the Diocese of Nzara in Western Equatoria to improve education and food security. The Diocese of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania has a relationship with Kejokeji, which is on the border south of Juba, for a population that largely fled into Uganda. And the Diocese of Bethlehem has continued to support that group, even though many of its persons are still in Uganda. I wanted to go back and ask Joseph about how can AFRECS further deepen our relationship with South Sudanese Episcopalian leaders and lay persons and broaden our contribution to peace building in South Sudan. So perhaps Joseph, if you would want to comment on that, and then Phil, you could come in.
Thank you, Ambassador Dane. I think to deepen our relationship with the Episcopal Church leadership is one of the aspects is actually what is already taking place. The prayer that you are, praying for us, visiting us, having this kind of interchange visit, not only you coming, but also taking leaders from South Sudan to come to, AFRECS meetings or to visit the church Episcopalian in America, and then also exploring all dimensions and dynamics of what is happening in the South Sudan, understanding the areas of needs, because the areas of needs in South Sudan are so vast. It's just like an ocean when you look at them. But I think the more we become more focused on specific needs that are there, and then bringing your expertise and your understanding and advise the leaders is very key and crucial. There are more that we can learn from you, and then also there are more that you can learn from us, given the fact that particularly, let me say, now in areas of how people can manage conflicts, and then bringing people together to discuss, to encourage the leaders. And for example, now in the South Sudan leadership, particularly the leadership of Archbishop Justin Badi, is much engaging the stakeholders in the South Sudan to implement the peace process. Is engaging them through South Sudan Council of Justice, through JPRC, meeting the stakeholders, both the government and then the oppositions, in encouraging them how they can implement peace, and also maintain the security in the country. Also thinking much about how, particularly those that are not signatories, had to be, encouraged to sign peace and so on. Now, in that aspect, your expertise are really, very important, because you have the resources in teaching like trauma, healing, issues to do with reconciliations, and then issues to do with forgiveness and so on. These are all issues that we can share together. And I believe that we can deepen more in that way. The other aspect is that we will love to hear about your stories also as well. There are other stories that we can learn from you more, that can be an example for us in order to learn how we can live together, how we can, in our divisiveness, in our turmoil, in our crisis, we can be able to take that heart of humbleness and obedience, of listening to one another and encouraging one another in order to build peace in the country. Putting Southern Sudan together is very challenging. It's not an easy thing. But when we put our hands together, our head together, I think it's much better. Because I remember even with the ending the war with Khartoum, without you, our brothers in the West, and particularly in America, praying for us, encouraging us, giving the churches the voice, so that the voice of the voiceless is heard. I don't think the issues we would have been out today having peace now with the Northern Sudan. Now it is a war among ourselves. What is it that we need to do? And what is it that you can need to encourage? And you have already started it. We just need to continue deepening it through conversations in a way we had, visit, and then encouraging one another. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to move on to the chat, but I just wanted to say a word about, we showed a map of Sudan as it now is. What has happened in Sudan is quite interesting, because the overthrow of Omar Hassan Ahmed Bashir as the president has ushered in a transitional period in Sudan, and the transitional government has been very clear in its emphasis on religious toleration and religious freedom in the new Sudan. And when I visited at the beginning of February of this year, I found that there was a lot of exuberance among our Episcopalian friends about the new situation there. So we're looking to increase our cooperation with Sudan. We've already been able to help a bit with supporting girls' education in Kadugli Diocese, but we're in touch with Archbishop Ezekiel Kondo, the primate of Sudan, and the provincial secretary, Musa Abu Jam, who may be on this, may be listening on this call. We're quite interested in expanding our cooperation there over time. So now if we can move on to the chat. We welcome Reverend Jeffrey Hoare from St. Albans. Good to have you with us today. Elizabeth Bowe has posed a question to Dr. Balal. Can you see that, Joseph, on the chat or not? Or I'll read it to you.
No.
So, Dr. Balal, what gives you hope and joy in your ministry that you'd like to share with people who may know very little about South Sudan beyond what's on the news? And anything you might be able to tell us about peace-building work with children and youth.
Thank you very much for that questions. I think we remain a people of hope all the time, because the crisis in South Sudan had been a long crisis that for many decades. If I had to give an example of myself, I was born in war, I grew in war, I got married in war, I had children in war. At a certain point, I thought I might even die in war. And yet here I am, and I'm hopeful that this country will survive again, will revive and survive again, and we can be able to rebuild it again. But in order for us to be able to rebuild this country, the best thing is actually now to rebuild our young people, to take the mind of young people away from the path that we are, the conversation that is now going currently in the South Sudan. The violence, the level of the violence, the tribalism that are there, the poverty that are there. We need to move them that there is always hope, there is always something. And one of that thing is actually education that I was talking earlier on. For example, now we had even 30,000 youngsters that are eligible to go to universities, but you can find that the universities are not enough for them. 5 only universities that are available, and they only take 700, and then the rest are remaining in the waiting list. And that is why when we came and began now saying we are going to build a university, the idea is actually to fill that gap, bringing these young people better support to go for higher educations that are now ending in, because there is nothing. They probably study primary school, they study secondary school, there is no any job, they become street children, they begin to develop antisocial behavior and so many other things. So if we take them along with us in a journey through educations, we help them. But in the end of the day, they can be able to support themselves, but not only supporting themselves, they'll be able to rebuild their own sort of nation. And we're giving them a notion of citizenship, ownership, patriotism, how they can change the phenomena, the equilibrium that we are in, having quite a lot of problems that are not good, in order that the children will be say, we don't want to be like what our great-parents had suffered for, or our fathers have suffered for. We need to have a complete new South Sudan. The other activities that now we are doing with youth, beside the Bible studies and others, we also bring in an element of sport, football, netball, athletics, things that are engaging them all the time. They are so busy so that they cannot, go into a mode of being bored and getting into drugs and many other things that were there. And in their coming together in football, we are bringing different tribes together. They are children that are coming from different groups, different tribes. They had a conversation, they began knowing each other. Even some of them at certain point might have been deemed, by other groups as enemies. But now when they come together, the children come together, they begin discovering, oh no, we are not enemies, we are brothers. Recently, just want to give you an example of celebrating in a centenary. The church, the Episcopal Church, were able to bring all the youth of Episcopal Church inside Juba to have a competition in football, in athletics, and so many other things. And it was so a great joy to see how these young people are jubilant, they are so happy, and then even that become a trauma healing by itself. So there are more that need to be done in South Sudan, and we are trying to fill that kind of gap.
I might just add, thank you, Dr. Balal. The group establishing the university has gone about this in the smartest way by having a long-term vision, a capital campaign for a campus of its own, but in the meantime, creating a structure over existing institutions, Rank Theological College being one of them, to establish an umbrella university using these campuses and bringing students onto existing campuses. So while one might engage in fundraising for a long-term building campaign, in the short term, someone can engage with scholarships, and AFRECS has, at the Archbishop's urging, so far sent a modest amount for scholarships for these students. But the university is happening, even as its cornerstone was first laid just a few months ago. So the education is happening. The campus will come, the physical campus will come later.
This response to one of the questions on the chat from Ron Hart, one of the supporters of the work from the UK, asking how AFRECS can help the university. We would like to continue our support of scholarships and find ways to expand that if possible, because it's really a very, very important activity. There's also a question about that comes from Richard Jones, who asks Joseph if he could describe a day in the life of a student at Bishop Gwynn College, which is kind of the flagship institution of the new Episcopal University of South Sudan.
Thank you very much for that question. Bishop Gwynn College had been in the center of all the Episcopal Church of South Sudan. If I can take it into history, all our bishops and archbishops and majority of our leaders are graduate of Bishop Gwynn College. And they were able to contribute tremendously. Even Justin Badi now, who is now also, had his doctorate recently in Uganda Christian University. He was a student there. Myself was a student in Bishop Gwynn College. And Bishop Gwynn College had been bringing all the tribe of the Southern Sudan together. And in their campus, as they sit all together, they had a lot of interaction and conversations that are helping each other in a way of how they rebuild their life together as South Sudanese, with one identity, that we are South Sudanese. And that also, Bishop Gwynn College also offer trainings now in different, subject. For example, Peacebuilding is one of the training in Bishop Green College. And they are not only training the students as Peacebuilding, because we are now trying to do a department there. They are also even bringing people from outside in order that they can be trained how to become peace builders themselves. They will go back to the community. They will train more people how to be peace builders. And then on top of that, we are also now bringing the subject of law, because we realize that in Southern Sudan, law and order is a problem. It doesn't mean that we do not have Ministry of Justice. It doesn't mean that we do not have trained lawyers. But one thing that we realize that probably is missing is that kind of elements of fearing God lawyers who can be sitting there and judging rightly, providing a very good justice. Lawyers that cannot be corrupted by being bribed in order for them to do things that are not right. Lawyers that can see that the law is reinforced, that they can work with the law enforcement in order to make that the security is maintained. All that kind of things now is coming also into element of Bishop Green College. And currently, because of the COVID-19, we closed down, but we are now planning to reopen the university, the Bishop Green College in February. And this coming week, which is actually on the 25th, we're bringing the Senate together, the principal together, for us to plan the principle of KGKG, the principle of RAIN, the principle of St. John in Wa, the principle of Chima in Meridi, and then including Bishop Green College. We're coming together to look at the overhaul of the stuff that we have, what qualification do they have, what subject are they teaching, and then we are developing, we have already developed the curriculum, unified theological curriculum, but we are now also developing a unified curriculum in business and administration, in educations, and we are going to develop the curriculum in agriculture. We are also going to develop a curriculum in peace building. As I was saying, the law is already being developed and being approved. And we are now, working on this at Bishop Green College, and Bishop Green College is doing fantastic.
Joseph, thank
yes.
you. You almost alluded to one of the two remaining questions here, one of which is just if you could comment on how the COVID pandemic has affected operations, whether in Rank at Rank Theological College or at Bishop Gwynn. You mentioned that there had been a shutdown, but perhaps now that's changing. And then if you could perhaps close your comments with an answer to the question, how can we best pray for the work of AFRECS and the partnerships in South Sudan?
Thank you. The COVID-19 just come like a surprise to all of us. It impacted in one way or the other when it came in, where all the colleges were shut down. But what happened is that we then encouraged that the students that in the third year who had already had until April have their courses, they need to be given a kind of still training and then also exams. And as I was talking to Principal Jacob today, he was telling me that they are giving exams to some of their few students that are, have done quite a lot of courses, and they have been doing courses. He will be doing these exams in the next few 2 weeks that are coming. We discussed this with the primate, who is Haight and Chanchala. We discussed this now that because majority of the students had to be sent home, they cannot stay together, and those that were able to be locked here in Juba, like in Bishop Green College, they cannot travel anywhere. We now was thinking that in February next year, we'll be able to open the university, the colleges. The same thing with the KGKG. They were able also to give exams to the third years, but the rest are waiting. And KG now is moving away from where they are in Uganda. They are coming now back to KG because there is already relative peace there. And they are also, will be happening that within the new year, the students will be taught now in KG. The same, yeah, the same with, yeah.
I think we are nearing the end of our time, but we're ending on the right topic, which is your thoughts on how best to pray for the work of AFRECS and the work you are doing in South Sudan.
Yeah. First, we will encourage you to pray, pray about the situation in South Sudan. You pray also meaningfully in a way that whatsoever God is giving you, support the work of the theological colleges that are happening, like the scholarship that you have provided to Bishop Green College by, giving 10 students that are coming under primate in order to study at Bishop Green College. They have already started, and just the COVID now closed it, and then, support the university work, in whatsoever way that God is able to give to you. If whatsoever smaller way that you're giving to us is enormous indeed. I remember when previously you in AFRECS and particularly gave us money that was able, I think 20,000 that we were given to us in the university. Now we are able to purchase the land for the university, which is 4 kilometers square, which is 12,000 square meters that are there. And we are now moving even to say next year we are going to start activities there by building the first administrative block, fencing, and then many other things. We want also to start new departments there, all this kind of thing. So you pray and then support us with resources like books, support us even with lecturers, people that will come even if on the short term, to lecture. It will be very good. Now with the new technology that we have, like now we are in webinar like this, you might not necessarily even need to come here. You can give the lectures where you are, and we can deliver it here. So in one way, these are the more positive things that are now happening in order that you can be able, these are part of the prayer that you can be able to support us in the university, our theological colleges, and then the work of the peace building. I think you need also to pray very hard of how now we can support, particularly now, engaging with the issues of how we are building the communities together, because in the South Sudan there is this inter-communal conflict that are going on. The cattle keepers and farmers conflict, the cattle raiding and revenge killing attacks that are there. Pray for us in that way. And then whatsoever that God gave to you, we encourage that you share that with us so that this can be able to give JPRC, bringing farmers together with the cattle keepers into a kind of dialogue and compromise of how they can work together, like what we did with the community of Tali and Tarekeka Mundari community, Nyangwara community were farmers, and then they were able to come together and then ended the conflict that is there. So that kind of support, I think, will be very, very much welcome, and that would be one of the things that I would say you pray for us in that way, and that would be great.
Thank you, Brother Joseph. That says it very well. I think in closing, I would just add, you've heard Joseph use the word encourage many times. And my reflection on this mission is that the encouragement most definitely runs both ways. And the stories that some of the stories we've alluded to and the experiences that we've had in relationship, the examples of faith, deep faith, perseverance, are just so inspiring, and the encouragement that those of us involved in this mission get from that is hard to describe, and I'm very grateful for that. And so I think we've reached the end of our time. I want to thank again my fellow panelists, but especially the SEEP network for putting this together. And I want to extend my thanks to all of you who've sat through with us. Oh, good. We have our moderator back also to bid farewell. Yeah, I'll just once again close with that message of gratitude for I guess what I can say is all I have received from this mission relationship.
Can I step in for one last
Please. Yep.
word? Reading from a message to me from Bishop Daniel way back in 1997 that might be good for all of us. It says, God loves, he wrote this in a Bible to me, God loves always includes a choice and an action, and our love should be like his. How well do you display your love for God in the choices you make and the actions you take? Might sum it up.
Very, very good way to close. Thank you, Jackie. Still teaching me all these years later.
Oh, no. We're in it together.